Welcome in, everyone. We are going to do a three-part reflective storytelling series on the Brothers Grimm fairy tale called The White Snake. And what we're going to do is we're going to share the story in three parts. We're going to pause in each part, and then we're going to reflect on some of these hidden archetypes and deeper mythic motifs and meanings within the story. And what are some of the questions that we may ask to draw out these hidden layers within our present movement of life? What are the invitations that are opening up for us within as well as outside of us? And therefore gain greater insight on how to navigate the path that is right here in front of us. Okay, let's begin the story. The White Snake, fairy tale of the Brothers Grimm. Long, long ago, there was a king, a noble king, who was famed for his wisdom and his knowledge. Indeed, it seemed that secret things came to him on the very lips and breath of the wind itself. And this king had a very strange custom. Every night, after dinner, when the table had been cleared, when all the guests had gone, he would have one trusty servant bring in one last dish. And this dish was covered, so no one knew what was in it, not even the servant himself. And when he was sure he was quite alone, the king would lift that cover and enjoy that one last dish. Now, after many, many years, this has gone on for a long time, eventually the curiosity of the servant became too strong. And when he was carrying that dish away, he carried it right up into his own room, closed the door, locked it. Now, in the privacy of his own secret space, he uncovered that lid, and there on the plate, he saw a white snake. And he couldn't deny himself the pleasure of knowing this snake. He needed to taste it. Something inside of him said, "We have to taste this." Cut off a little piece. He put it in his mouth. And as soon as it touched his tongue, he began to hear strange whisperings just outside his window. So he went over, opened it, looked out outside to see who was there, and he found some sparrows. Sparrows who were speaking and telling the stories of the things they had seen in the fields and in the woods. Eating the snake had given him the power to know the language of animals. Now, on this same day, it just happened that the queen lost her most beautiful, precious ring. And because this servant was able to go freely amongst the castle, suspicion of stealing this ring fell on him. And the king brought him right there before him. And with angry words says, "Look, either you find this ring or you find the real thief, or you are going to be the one held responsible and you will be executed." The servant tried to pronounce his innocence, but it was in vain, and he was dismissed. Now, with a troubled heart, fearful mind, the servant, he walked down into the courtyard garden to reflect on, like, what could he do? How can he get out of this mess? And in doing so, as he sat there, he began to hear some other type of talking, some other speech. And he listened. Just on the other side of the reeds of where he was sitting, there was this brook. And beside this brook, there was two ducks. And these two ducks were telling the stories in these like confidential conversation. They're kind of whispering, telling of all the places they had waddled about, what they had seen, what they had eaten. And one of the ducks said, something weighs heavy on my stomach. As I was eating in haste, I swallowed a ring that was beneath the window of the queen. As soon as the servant heard this, he grabbed its neck and brought it into the kitchen and says, "Hey, chef, look at this great duck I found. I think it is ready to be roasted." Chef came over and, felt the weight. He's like, sure enough, she has wasted no time like fattening herself. It's like, sure enough, cut off its head, and they began to prepare it for the spit, and there they found the ring. Now, the servant was able to prove his innocence. And the king, because he was a noble king, a good king, he wanted to make amends. And so he said, "Servant, forgive me. I would love to allow you to a wish. I will grant a wish, and I will put you into any position in the court that you would like to be." And the servant says, "I don't want any of that. But if you are willing to grant a wish, then I would love a horse and some money so I can go about and see the world." The king granted him his wish. That's the first part of the story. All right. So now we're going to reflect on these hidden archetypal imagery and these hidden mythic motifs woven into the story. And what are some of the questions we may want to ask to see where these may be present in our own life? So here we are in a story where there are kings and queens, there's castles and there's servants. Now, in a lot of this mythic motifs, the king represents this type of inner nobility, right? The sense of inner sovereignty, inner power of self, right? The castles typically represent two different things. They represent a place of knowledge, a place of power, but they also represent where, the castle has walls. And the walls are built around the castle. There's a court. It's all this lavishness, this pretense of affluence. And some may say that the castle is where we want to be. But the others may say we want to get beyond the castle walls out into those wild interiors where we come into contact with our own undomesticated self. We come into our own wild knowing, that which can't be conformed to that of the ways of the court. So here we see there's a servant. Now, the servant is tending to this other sovereignty. So basically, a power outside of himself. And there is this element there. There's this moment where there's something there. The king has hidden knowledge. He has a daily ritual that gives him access to that hidden knowledge. And we see how the curiosity of the servant, which is, in this mythic sense, this archetypal or rites of passage psychology, we say he received a calling to go beyond what was norm, what was known, to expand beyond that. Right? When we have that calling, that's what gives us entrance into the adventure or the descent. Right? And so we see that the king, right, or the servant, he takes that dish and he finds there's a white snake. Now, snake represents transformation, represents the transformational power of rebirth. And when we go back even deeper, it represents hidden knowledge. Right? You go back to the Garden of Eden, right? It was the serpent that invited and told the true story of what the apple held in the Garden of Eden, because that was the apple that was from the tree of knowledge. And because it's a white snake, there is a sense that it has a sense of purity to it, has a sense of higher knowledge, higher understanding, right? And so he partakes. And when he takes that knowledge, that's when the journey begins. Like in the hero's journey, there's the descent. So he answered the call, he got new knowledge. And because of new knowledge, his old world is no longer, and he must now descend into that knowledge. And he must use that knowledge in order to save himself and to come into an initiation of that knowledge. Right? So, in this part of the story, we may reflect on a couple of things. Some questions are, what powers outside of you are you serving? Where might you begin to come back into your own inner sovereignty, your own sense of nobility of soul? And to do that, you may reflect on, where are you feeling that call to go just beyond the periphery of your awareness? Right? It says it's just what's on the periphery of our awareness that is probing us into the deeper meanings of our life. So like right now, What might be probing you into deeper knowledge, going beyond the norm, beyond that which has been accepted and which is you're supposed to do, right? That which is feeding this outside power. What might be calling you into this hidden knowledge? Now, another aspect of this journey is that, when he was vindicated, he was given the opportunity to stay in the court and have a higher position. But there was something in that nobility of soul that got awoken. It's like, no, I no longer want to serve this outside power. I am ready to go beyond the walls of the castle and mature into this knowledge that I have just been given access to. So now he's maturing into his own nobility of soul. What would that look like for you? What is that invitation for you? All right, let's go back into the story.